With the holiday movie season ready to kick off, let's get started with Fantastic Beasts 2: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Look, I know it's not called Fantastic Beasts 2, but it is the sequel, so let's work with it. The Crimes of Grindelwald is the second in the Fantastic Beasts series, directed by David Yates, who's done a number of the Harry Potter movies. One of the things I've noticed with any of these new Harry Potter Wizarding World stories is that whenever a new movie or book comes out, I always find that I really miss the world. It's always been so detailed and rich and full of depth and interesting, likable characters that I'm always glad to experience all new chapters in this series. And this one picks up directly where the last movie left off. Grindelwald is imprisoned, and as you know, for any good plot, the prison transfer cannot go right, so he can escape. And escape he does, and he's ready to start havoc in an all-new story. In the meantime, Newt Scamander still has plenty of reservations about joining up with the Ministry of Magic because he definitely does not want a desk job. We get to see old favorites along the way from Jacob Kowalski, Queenie Goldstein, and her sister Tina. And of course we have a young Dumbledore who is played by Jude Law, and he does a really great job of channeling all those characteristics of the old wizard. Johnny Depp plays Grindelwald in this film, and he also does a really good job. There's a lot of times over the last few years, especially since Pirates of the Caribbean, that Johnny Depp has had a very certain type of character act that he's done. In this one, it's more toned down and it's a little bit more sinister, so it really works for that, and he's definitely trying something different, and different is good. It's hard to talk about a Fantastic Beasts film without talking about the titular Fantastic Beasts of the movie, and there's some really great ones, all new additions as well as some of the old favorites like the Bowtruckle and the Niffler. With any of these stories, I love getting wrapped up into the background and the history of not only the characters, but the world itself. And there are plenty of great nods and cameos in there. Even Harry Potter's musical theme plays when they enter Hogwarts, which was a nice little throwback for me. While I enjoyed the film and am definitely looking forward to the next installment because they leave this so open-ended, I would be absolutely stunned if they didn't do another one. There are a couple things that I had issues with. There is a lot of ground to cover with all the back histories and stories and all the mysteries that have always taken place in J.K. Rowling's books, and sometimes that doesn't always work for a screen adaptation. When J.K. Rowling finished the 7th book in the Harry Potter series and went on a number of press tours after, she did a whole bunch of like, oh, this character did this and this happened at this event and oh, by the way, and a lot of things were introduced about a lot of different characters. I can see some of the attempts to retcon some of that into new stories. I think what was one of the more notable things for me is that unlike a book, you don't have the time to really go into all these backstories and characterizations and everything else and have it all fleshed out. I understand there's a word of God when it comes from an author, but I don't think she has the luxury of going into all these various histories and stories like the books are able to do. One of the biggest issues of this film for me was coincidentally one of the main highlights of the first film for me. I really enjoyed the growing relationship between Jacob Kowalski and Queenie Goldstein. I thought that was a neat pairing. With Jacob, you had a muggle's eye view of the wizarding world because he was kind of our proxy that really got to ooh and ah and wow at all these wondrous, new, exciting things that were laying out before him, and I really like that they kept his fate from the first film open-ended so that if they wanted to address that in the next film they could, and they did. Queenie from the first film, however, was a really likable character. She was competent, she was very sweet-natured, she was definitely taken with Jacob, and you wanted to see their relationship succeed. And I think that some of the issues that I had with this new film, and I'm going to get a little bit into spoilers on that, I found it odd that their relationship was so stable in the first film that she would need to enchant him in order to keep him. She did this enchantment love thing where it basically just kept him out of his mind so that he would stay in love with her. And even after Newt dispelled the charm, Jacob was like, you never needed to do this in the first place. I've been in love with you this whole time. It was explained away as that she did that because she was so insecure about that he never would commit to her in marriage, and this was clearly the only way that he would be able to do so. And his explanation for not really just jumping the gun was very logical. There would be a lot of problems associated with a muggle married to a magic user. It was kind of an interesting allegory of racism because there were certain things, especially in the 1920s, you couldn't have mixed couples really of any type, and that was a thing where they just couldn't risk it. He didn't want to risk her getting hurt or thrown in prison, and she did not take that well. And Queenie's story arc in this whole movie was very contradictory to how she was in the first film. The best way I can describe her whole arc in this film is She charms him to stay in love with her, which she didn't need to do. She runs away because he won't marry her, not under the given circumstances. She goes to find her sister. She doesn't find her sister. She sits on a corner and cries. She runs into Grindelwald's crew, and as she knows from the first film, he's evil and not to be trusted, but then he's like, oh no, you're innocent, you're fine. And all of a sudden, she's completely on board pro-team Grindelwald. Even at the end, I was completely surprised. And I know J.K. Rowling stories, any of these Harry Potter wizarding stories, they always have twists and turns and characters die and things don't go exactly the way you planned. You think one thing is one thing when it turns out to be something completely different. That's the nature of it, but it just seemed like such an abrupt heel turn. Actually, the best example I can give to that is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where Palpatine has Anakin in front of him. He's like, join me, and let's rule the galaxy. And Anakin's like, okay. And it's like, what? You're just willing to give everything up just like that? And that was, coincidentally, the biggest problem I had with Episode 3. After everything they've been through, it's join me. Cool. Let's do this. And she does that, and after this crazy rally that takes place at the end of the movie, and I was just like, what are you doing? Because you're not the character that I remembered from the first one. And even Tina, who I liked from the first film, I don't feel like she got as much to do as she could have. I like Newt Scamander. He was definitely fun. That was another thing I wish that for a movie titled Fantastic Beasts, that he had more time to play with said Fantastic Beasts. They kind of take the background as the movie goes on. They play small parts here and there, but I really loved the whole Pokemon trainer style thing that Newt Scamander had going on in the first film, where he's going out and catching all these crazy fantastical creatures and taming them, and they live in his big crazy suitcase animal sanctuary. Even with the flaws, I had a good time with The Crimes of Grindelwald. I just love the characters, I love the music, I love the magic elements, I love the rich lore and the world that they create. As much as I love Fantastic Beasts and I was willing to go along with the ride from the first film, I think there are just certain things that you cannot do as well in a movie format that's 2 hours as opposed to a much longer hour book reading experience. You just don't get the depth. And I kind of got the feeling that Rowling, who wrote the screenplay for this, some things just got rushed or hastily explained away. And I wish that, even like I said, even though there's a book, and it's a book of the screenplay, and I'm sure it'll be fun to read, I haven't read it yet because I wanted to avoid spoilers. I managed to go into this movie avoiding spoilers. But I felt there were certain elements that just could not be given the care that they needed to in order to really flesh out everything. Grindelwald felt very much like the new Voldemort in this movie, and even had a lot of similarities. I don't think he's as threatening, and I don't think he's as compelling. I think there's some interesting little backstory to him that they kind of bridged here and there. And I think he's got a greater big plan. And I think he's supposed to be the next... Well, I guess he's the pre-Voldemort since this takes place before. But I don't think he has the evil oomph that Voldemort had. But that's my thought. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. There were a couple elements that I wish had been treated better. I wish there had been more Fantastic Beasts in the film. But I was pleased overall, and I would definitely recommend it. It's another good entry in the Wizarding World series, and I hope that if they make a third film that they'll eventually clear up some of these what-does that I had with this. But again, with any of the Harry Potter books, I was always left with a lot of questions, and I like that. I like not just having everything laid out to me on a plate, and there are things that I need answers for, and I just had to suffer through about a year or two before I finally got them. But thanks again for checking out this latest review, and certainly I will see that next time. But I guess in true Potter fashion, the best way to put an end to this review is Reviewicus Endum.